Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Jonathan Sexton has made it!
Do you feel moderately happy?
No, I feel like I've been kissing my sister, I suppose.
In the pocket for his drop goal attempt. Here he goes, O'Gara. He's done it! That surely is the Grand Slam.
We target players all the time. That's part of rugby, isn't it? Let me know.
Sexton, wonderful pass and Stockdale finishes.
There'll be more than grenades. There'll be full tanks and full shells landing on the Aviva.
Grand Slam winners on St. Patrick's Day at Twickenham.
All right, so it is finally here. The 2019 Six Nations Championship gets underway this evening, 8 o'clock at the Stade de France. All gets underway with France against Wales. 2:15 tomorrow at Murrayfield. It is Scotland up against Italy. All, of course, really just building up to Ireland against England. 4:45 start at the Aviva Stadium. Delighted to have Brian O'Driscoll in studio. How are you?
Very good.
And a real treat. Keith Wood has joined us of a Friday afternoon.
How are you?
And made an effort.
Look,
very well.
I think it's very important.
It's going to be a one-time thing. You might as well go all out.
Dress down Friday for Drico, you know.
I think we should just go with a suits theme in general of a Friday afternoon.
Doesn't wear a tie very often, so it must be a big day for him.
I wear a tie now that my neck has shrunk to a sort of more manageable size.
Excited?
Yeah, looking forward to it. It's always the same, isn't it? It's always very bullish early on the week, and the closer you get to the game, a little bit more nervous you get, the more you think it's going to be a tighter affair. But I'm very confident in this Irish team, and I think if they put together any sort of decent performance, I think they'll have too much firepower and too much cleverness for this English team.
As you say, usually bullish earlier in the week, but I don't remember too many Six Nations where there's such a level of expectation. Like, no team has done back-to-back Grand Slams since it became a Six Nations. Yet there feels as though there's an atmosphere around Ireland that's the expectation. Anything less will be a disappointment, which, is that completely unrealistic?
I think it's unrealistic, but I also think it's a nice place to be. I think that to say that we have an expectation that Ireland are going to win, I kind of wish I had that at the start of my career. I think we had a little bit of it at the end when we crossed paths, but yeah, I'm a bit bullish too. I'm just wondering whether that was just me. I get very excited and then nervous. The more you talk about it, the more nervous you get. And there is a sense of something in this one. I think every single year you get to the start of Six Nations, you start having conversations. There's a whole load of shadow boxing going on in the press conferences. Listen to some of the rubbish that's been coming out of the English camp for the last while, and everybody's trying to manoeuvre where they are moving expectation, where they want it. I mean, I had it from a few English guys that I was talking to yesterday saying, well, this is the first time really that you're probably favourites to win it. I said, no, I think we would have been in the past. Yeah, but the World Cup is coming and this is going to put huge pressure on you. And I said, I think you're kind of trying to convince yourself more than we're trying to convince ourselves. I still think, you made a comment there, you trust this Irish team. This game last year and the All Black game are the two main ones that stand out for me, that after the first 5 or 10 minutes of those games, I said, we're in the right frame of mind to actually go and win them. And I actually had no doubt but that we were going to win them after 5 or 10 minutes. I didn't have that beforehand. Yeah.
Gordon Darcy said during the week, pressure's needed. It used to be suffocating. We went through those days. That actually now, for this group of players, they're so used to playing in this type of atmosphere, this type of big game, that rather than being suffocated, they now need it to bring the best out of them.
Yeah, I think if you look at the spine of the team as well, that the level of experience, in all the key positions, your captain at hooker, good line-out operator in Devon Toner with a wise head on old shoulders, and James Ryan. You've got Peter O'Mahony in the back row, those half-back pairing. You don't have Rob Kearney, but you've got Robbie Henshaw at fullback now, and the ever-emerging Gary Ringrose. So I think if you look at the need for conversation, communication, and for quality in all the key positions, I think we've got that. And then you add in world-class players like Tadhg Furlong as well that can just go about their business. I just feel as though there's nothing that really phases them, and it's typified by the performances of Conor Murray and Johnny Sexton over the course of the last year. There's never a need to panic, even when it's not going for you, and there hasn't been the case very often in the last 12 or 18 months, but it's it is a big case of trusting the process, the next play, trying to to create something to be able to break a defence down and manipulate it so the play that you've decided to do will work. It's such a Joe Schmidt philosophy that there's no reason to doubt it now, and it's been achieved time and again in the last year, and it's just a case of continuing that momentum going forward, with Japan in mind.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested with the pressure conversation and whether it was pressure when we were, playing back in the day, whether that was the thing that held us back or not. I don't know that it was. I think we're under pressure for different reasons. When I look at this team, I look at the amount of preparation has been done. From the experience of the players who've actually been involved in Joe's preparation for a long period of time, but they seem as if they're well geared up for the battle. They know what they have to do and they're organised and what they have to do. Times are different. There was a change in selection. It could be 5 or 6 guys changed every week, 15, 20 years ago. And that puts a huge pressure on itself. Plus, it wasn't professional. Plus, a whole variety of other elements. I think they look like a team who know what they want to do, with a coach who knows what he wants the team to do, who's quite happy to make changes at half time if that's what's needed to do it. So for me, there's a sense of confidence in it. It doesn't mean that we go and absolutely win it, that this is and I would be wary of some of the conversation that happens, but I'd be confident nonetheless that I'd be confident that we'll have a really good performance. And that can be good, and that could be good enough.
I think you've seen the consistency's always been Ireland's issue in the past of having a great an 8.5, 9 out of 10 performance against one of the powerhouses,
lose a run of ourselves,
and then a complete dip to a 5.5 or a 6, and you might scrape by one of the minnows, and that's always been an issue. And I think what the consistency of performance, never really dipping below a 7.5, is the real strength of this group of players. And you hear them talking about practicing excellence. The standards of training are so high and the pressure is so intense, put on them by Andy Farrell and by Joe Schmidt and Simon Easterby, that I do think it's a bit like those sevens coaches that make the training sessions much harder than any match. I think there's a little bit of that. They feel the environment that they're pressurised in training is almost worse at times than what they're getting, the scrutiny they're getting at game time.
So there's no longer the almost.
They don't have Joe Schmidt in their ear anymore. He's up in the. He might be talking through a microphone or through water runners, but ultimately they don't have that real scrutiny, and so I think they're able to just relax a little bit, and almost the pressure is lessened on the big day.
There's no doubt about the big team selection, which is Robbie Henshaw at full back. And when you were last in here, you were going through a depth chart for centres. And at that stage, I don't think you had any sense that Henshaw at full back was even a possibility. Are you taken aback? Are you somewhat surprised by what's happened this week?
I'm not, and only on the grounds that I know that it's probably his favoured position. And
that's the one thing you hear from everybody, that his eyes light up.
So I did know that, but because Rob Kearney has been consistently good in every big game that's been asked of him, the expectation was that he'd be picked again. He had a poor game by his standards on Friday, and ultimately that's cost him his position this weekend. And it's a big sign, and we saw it in the early 2000s as well, where we had positional shifts for Ireland just to get the best players on the park. Shane Horgan played on the wing for the first time in his first cap against Scotland in 2000, having never played on the wing before, just because you want to get the best footballers, most informed footballers on the pitch. And I think there's definitely a case of that. I think, we haven't written off Rob Kearney altogether. I'm sure we're going to see him over the course of this Six Nations for sure, but it's a great opportunity for someone like Robbie Henshaw, who, if he sees his future at full back, to put his hand up and say, do you know what, I wouldn't mind being full back for the World Cup.
Yeah, what happens now if he has a sparkling game?
Well, it's his to give up then.
Do you think Rob Kearney's sitting at home this weekend quite worried? Because, look, as you say, he's faced so many challenges over the last decade, seen them all off. Every time he needs a big performance, he's generally found one.
He's always found one, in fairness to him. Yeah, he's always found one.
The worry must be that he doesn't get the chance to put in that big performance in a green jersey between now and the World Cup if Henshaw goes well, and maybe he doesn't have the versatility that Henshaw has, that Larmour has, that Addison has in a 31-man World Cup squad.
There's no doubt Rob Kearney's been had some niggles over the last few weeks. He's probably low on game time. He didn't have his best outing, and maybe, I don't know, I'm not privy to training sessions, maybe a little bit of the zip is beginning to go in the legs. It happens around that age, different for different players, but he's got a lot of miles on the clock. He started as an 18-year-old, bit of that Wayne Rooney, starting at 16, finishing up a little earlier than
He's in better condition than Wayne Rooney is.
That's true. Not as fond of a pint as Wayne.
Yeah, I just laughing. I said I retired before the zip went.
but there's nothing you can do there, and coaches see it at training as much as they see it in games, and there's no doubt Robbie Henshaw, he's definitely, for me, he's Joe Schmidt's type of fullback as well. Very good kicking game, very good aerially, good defender, and then he's a capability of being a good counter-attacking if he's given the opportunity. So he does fit that remit of needing more strings to your bow than maybe you might see from a more recent Rob Kearney performance. We know what we're getting from him, but maybe that counter-attacking opportunity and the attacking flair hasn't quite been there recently.
I thought Kearney had a dip about 2.5 years ago. He had hamstring and knee with whinging at him, and he had a little bit of a dip in form, and it was one of those things that could have been the end. And it wasn't the end. He actually came back and delivered, as you said, not generally, but he delivered in all the big games, and played incredibly well. There weren't that many options at that time either. Are there more options now with Henshaw, with Larmour, with
Carberry? There are,
Conway,
right?
With
there are, but if you look at the fullbacks that win World Cups, are they these crazy flair players? No, they're not. They're Josh Lucy, very solid player. You look back to Israel Dag, who had some flair for sure,
magic, yeah.
but very, very solid player as well. Good, again, really good kicking game. Going back to Matt Burke in '99, 2007, South Africa, Percy Montgomery, just really solid, an absolute rock at the back. You're not looking for someone to light it up.
Guys who don't make mistakes.
That's for the fans to love, the Jordan Larmours, but at this moment in time, would you be totally secure in having Jordan Larmour, ticking all those boxes in a big World Cup quarterfinal, semi-final, or final? I think the answer is no. From my perspective, he'll get there, but he's a young lad and with minimal experience, and I think you need someone with big confidence in their ability, good experience, and a group of good core skills across the board to give confidence to everyone else.
Does this shake Jordan Larmour's confidence? Because he was the next guy supposedly in the pecking order, and now Joe has a whole variety of different pecking orders for whatever he deems fit at any time, but so suddenly he's not there. He looks at another guy who's young, he could be there for a lot longer. Does that shake him in any way?
I don't know Jordan particularly well. I've met him a couple of times. He seems a confident guy. I don't think that he immediately expects to be in the starting 15 at the minute. I think he's probably very pleased with his very rapid rise to playing international rugby, to being involved in a Grand Slam game, winning a European Cup with Leinster, beating the All Blacks, within a 18-month, 2-year period of playing AIL.
Yeah.
So when you come from there, I think you can't be overly disappointed that
It's hard when you have a taste, though. It is.
It is.
You've had people talking for the last 6 months saying if it's not Kearney, it's you, and suddenly Henshaw appears out of the blue.
There's going to be opportunities, particularly over the Six Nations. Are we going to see a clean bill of health the whole way through? It hardly ever happened. It happened very luckily in 2009 and had a big impact on our consistency of performance. But these days, with the attritional nature of the game, you don't have that chance. Play the same units, to play the same back threes, to play the same centres. And that said, I think Joe Schmidt's going to play lots of combinations. I think there's a good chance that a good part of that 30-man squad that he has planned for the World Cup are going to get game time in the Six Nations, because if you don't give them game time now at the highest level, you give them one warm-up game before you go to Japan, and then hope that they're fine, having their previous game might have been 12 months before that. You can't do that. So I expect to see Chris Farrell out there. I expect maybe to see Robbie in the centre again. That's why Jordan might get an out. He'll definitely get a start. Rob might be there at full back. So I think you're going to see lots of variations over the course of this Six Nations.
Yeah, for me, that big difference between 2015 and now is looking for that strength and depth, not just as good players, but as good players who've played on a high level. And in times past, I think when you'd look at it and you'd say, well, we have to put out our best team, or if we don't, we risk losing the game. That seems to have shifted a little, hasn't it? That actually our best team could be our best team for Saturday, and we might have a different best team for next Saturday. That's a kind of unusual. It's a big shift.
Yeah, no, it is, and I think depending on what you definitely, you don't rule your game plan off stats, but looking at where teams are good, be it scrum or line out, if teams are good defensively in their line out, there's a necessity to have Dev Toner in there. If teams aren't as good, maybe you can mix in, okay, not in this case because he's injured for the first few games anyway, but an Ian Henderson and a James Ryan. So it's an opportunity to be able to try different combinations, because you're not going to have a full deck to choose from for the World Cup. Definitely not for the World Cup final. Over a 7-week period, you're going to have 5-6 injuries. You might get a few players back, but you're definitely going to have probably 5 or 6 players gone. So as we did in 2015,
you have to stay in long enough for them to get back. Yeah. That's the thing. There's no point being, if you're gone out, that they get back.
Guys who might see themselves as third choice now could easily find themselves on the bench in a World Cup quarter-final, semi-final.
Well, I think Jean-Marc Toussaint got his first cap in the World Cup final, so that's craziness.
Donald with the kick.
Luke Donald.
He hit a lovely little close to 9-iron.
He was surprised to get the goal, it has to be said. On Henshaw then at full-back, and Joe Schmidt was saying yesterday that if you look back in his career, he's actually played more minutes at full-back than he has in centre, and I'm sure Joe could put out to the second what he's played at full-back compared to centre. But you talk about the skill set required, and from a solid fullback that plays at a World Cup and gets to a high level, from what you've seen, the little bits you've seen at Henshaw, and he played half an hour against Treviso, I don't think he started the game at fullback since he was with Connacht in a Pro 14 game against Munster almost 3 years ago. Where does Henshaw fit in his skill set at fullback compared to Carney? Where are the areas where he's particularly strong, and where are the areas where England may find a weakness?
He'll read the grass cover really well. To be able to preempt where there might be an opportunity for the opposite 9 or opposite 10. I think as well, because Ireland play their wingers so high, there is an extra onus on the fullback to cover massive grass area, and that's where Rob Kearney, probably people don't have a full appreciation for how little he lets the ball drop, or how he catches it worst case scenario after one bounce more often than not. And that's an intuition in being able to read in advance of the ball being kicked where the likelihood of the space is being created for him to have a concern to get to that space. So I think Henshaw is able to read the game really well.
Sorry, is that an intuition that's built up by simply playing in that position week in, week out?
I think so. I think there's a footballing ability in there to be able to see it as well. And you'll see most of the time the place for fullbacks to live is in behind the ruck. Depending, provided it's not too far out on the extremity, they tend to sit between the 15s. But if you're, the general consensus is if you're sitting in behind the ruck, you give yourself a fighting chance of covering both sides. And as I said, Ireland do play their wingers quite high, particularly on Keith Earl's side. He reads it really well, so he gets probably a little bit more help from him than he might get from Jacob Stockdale. He's still learning his defence, and it's probably the last part of his game to fit into that jigsaw, but it's coming on leaps and bounds. He's obviously picked himself up a couple of intercepts, he's getting in the passing channel, but so he does like to play quite high, so maybe there is an expectation to just favour that side ever so slightly, because I think Keith Earl's experience on the wing allows him to be able to preempt when it's going to be nudged in behind him, and he is another one that deals with that ball brilliantly well, because he gets back, he's quick, he gets back one hop, he either kicks it himself or he feeds it into his full back, and they counter-attack or they launch down the field.
From an England point of view, if they are going to target him, I presume they're not just Gary owning it up there and putting a high ball in top of him, they're trying to get him running in down the sides.
Yeah, I think they're trying to find, I imagine, what would I know as a forward, but I would, for the idea of a guy who hasn't played there for a long time, let's see what his positional is like. Let's see, is there space? Let's see what Ireland do defensively, because Ireland may not go as high, just to make certain that this is covered. There's counter punch and counter punch all the way through it. I think they'll try and move him around, but he's big, he's fit. He hasn't played a lot of rugby, but we know that a lot of the training sessions are pushing the players to a high level. So it isn't as if they're going to be vulnerable when they get out there. They're actually up to speed, and that's part of it. I just like the idea of playing a guy in another position. And I know you mentioned
very French.
Shane, very French, very Australian. actually, and they used a lot of the great Australian teams from the 90s and thousands used to have players just all over the place, from Gitto playing 9 to 12 to 10, you know. I just think it gives a different sense of play. So he's going to look at it, even though he has played there in the past, he's still going to look at it differently. He'll want to get involved a little bit more, so when in a different fashion, because he'll suddenly see that he's creeping up a little because we've got the ball. He may become an option that Kearney mightn't have been, because Kearney looks at it in a slightly different way. Whether it's better or not, you don't know. But
I guess there's a possibility.
Just two other things. He won't be back there on his own the whole time. You know, Ireland do drop scrum half back into the backfield sometimes, and then Johnny will drop into the backfield. So it's not a case of he's always going to be on his lonesome back there. And the second thing has escaped me, so we'll listen to your question.
Great point.
It was really good.
I was going to say...
it was a lie, I'd say.
There's probably a good chance as well he ends up playing at centre at some stage during this game. If Larmour comes on, is it a possibility that it's one of...
For sure. I remember now, you've to also think that he's playing in his favourite position. So there's an excitement that comes with that there's... an energy that's like, all right, brilliant, this is where I want to actually be. I want to produce my best performance. So he's going to want to really excel in this game, because he now, like everybody else, realises an opportunity for him to play in his favourite position in the national team at full-back with the World Cup, you know, coming at us in 6-7 months' time. So he might play in the centre, with Larmour coming on, but he'll be hoping for 50-60 minutes that he puts in one of his better international performances, and then he'll be a difficult man to shift.
It's obviously been talked about as Henshaw replacing Kearney. In a way, though, is that actually Bundy Aki is the one replacing Kearney. That Aki has proven to be indispensable over the last year. Played every game in last year's Six Nations. Every big moment, he's been there. That's quite simply, Schmidt had to find a way for Aki to be in this team.
I don't think you could drop him. I don't think his performances for Ireland or for Connacht could warrant being dropped in any shape or form. He's been the consistent performer at centre. He's been, the one player that's I think he's played in nearly every Test match. Not all of them in Australia, but played all 5 in the Grand Slam. Played Argentina. Himself and Addison there was a little bit porous a couple of times. They would have been disappointed with some of the line breaks they conceded, but in general, his communication seems really good. I think the contact between him and Ringrose and Sexton has come on leaps and bounds. I think he knows how to pressurise really hard, but also sit off in defence when their numbers down. He's just a smart player, and he scored a nice few tries from close quarters as well. Don't forget that as well. Coaches like players that can get over the whitewash, and he's been shown time and again that he's capable of doing that. A very hard man to stop from 3 or 4 yards out.
I think it's that patience in defence. I don't think he had that at the very start. It's very hard to have it at the start. He was very keen for a bigger hit when he got the chance. As that has matured, just a year of experience, at it, he is far better linked now than he has been, and it seems to be a better line. And it is interesting to see that when he was with Addison, that was a disconnect, and I don't think he was comfortable for the fact that he'd someone outside him. And for Addison, it takes an extra little bit of time at that level too.
You're not in any ways worried that a couple of our key players might be a little bit undercooked? Sexton's played 3 times since the All Blacks game. Henshaw's played once since October.
I have an expectation that they'll go and deliver. I don't think that Henshaw will last 80 minutes, because I think he's going to be run all over the field. I think it'll be interesting to see, because he hasn't played a huge amount of rugby. I would still expect Johnny to play 65, 70 minutes, and I would expect him to play very well.
I think Henshaw will finish the game, only because I think he's got one of the biggest engines out there. I remember watching him a few seasons ago when he came back for his first game in an inter-provincial in the Aviva against Munster, and I remember him following a kick chase on 75 minutes, and he was the one leading the line, and just thinking, wow. Speaking to the boys himself and Gary Ringrose, particularly with Leinster, have huge engines and ability to back up work on work. So I don't think that'll be an issue. I think he's in the peak of his powers. His scores when he came back from his dislocated shoulder, had all improved. His pace, his power, his ability to cover distance in a shorter period of time. It's like everything's adds up to him being an 80-minute guy, irrespective of how much game time he has. So it's nice. It's almost like it's a real luxury for a coach knowing that you have players like that as well, like a James Ryan, that you're not thinking about substituting him. He's the young guy. He's 22 years of age. He's an 80-minute guy. He's going to deliver 80. So. Maybe he's a little bit off his game if you're going to take him off. That's the only way that you're going to substitute a James Ryan. So when you have that in your team as well, and you have some older players, and you have a Keith Earls, even though he's incredibly fit guy himself, it's nice to think about replacing other players rather than a guy that's just coming back from a stint out.
What do you make of this England team that's coming over? They're talking all week about it being a war of attrition, a slugfest.
Yeah.
Tuolagi's back, first time incredibly since 2013. He's going to start a Six Nations game. Billy Vunipola struggled over the last couple of years with injury. Like two big men returning. Is that what they're going to try and do? Somehow outpower Ireland?
For me, I kept looking at when you hear particular phrases being used all the time, you know that this is what's happening inside in the change room. It was just too brutal was the word that was used all the time. So there was an attritional, and it's a constant. I think it will be a bit of a battle, because I think England are being pumped up to that idea of it. And again, listening to Eddie Jones, which I mean, I just don't like the kind of trash talk chat stuff at all. I don't like it at all. But talking about the fact then, well, of course we're not the favourite. We're going to lose. Everybody thinks we're going to lose. Well, nobody's saying that. Actually, he's saying it. He's saying it because he wants to try and build that sort of narrative around all that element. I would look at England and think they're a very big physical team. I'm surprised they didn't pick Courtney Laws, and I'm going to disagree with myself again immediately. I think some of the guys they have there, if they get to too high a pitch, could lose it. And so I think England could suffer a little bit for discipline. Sinclair has a habit of going a little bit mad. Genge, if he comes off the bench, there's a few more that are in there as well.
Well, you think back to last year's game at Twickenham, and Owen Farrell, 5-6 minutes into the game, an absolute moment of madness, giving away a penalty. That you're looking even to their senior players and wondering, is the level of discipline there?
And he hasn't seemed to have learned that since, So he's actually disagreeing with everybody that he's entirely in the right. Is what he thinks. Well, he isn't.
Tuolagi, it feels as though he's been gone forever, and he's had every injury under the sun. You toured in 2013 with him in Australia. From what you've seen of him this season, though, for Leicester, is he a very different player that burst onto the scene 7-8 years ago?
I think when any time a player spends that period of time out, irrespective of what they've done beforehand, there's always a big question mark around what's going on in their head, and whether he's had injury upon injury, and that has a mental impact on how he physically plays the game. I think he's gotten a run of games this season. I'm a huge Manu Tuolagi fan, having toured with him in 2013 and played against him in that England game. When he came off the bench, I did not enjoy that 15 minutes. He is when he's at the peak of his powers, he is beyond a handful. He's almost unplayable.
What is it?
Just power, pace, ability to offload the ball, good lines of running, an unwillingness to go down. Some players, fight in the tackle, and some players concede. He is accelerating through the tackle, and I think personally Ben Teo's injury is a blessing in disguise for them, because I'd much rather play against Ben Teo than I would Manu Tuolagi. I think Tuolagi at his best has a lot more to his game. I think, from just to go back to Keith's point about England and about Eddie Jones, reading in the papers, there's a real focus on what Ben Youngs was talking about. The game's all about two areas. It's about the ground and the air. Ireland, historically have a big focus on their kick game, of winning more than their 50-50 share of contestables, and they've been very good at that. But I think England will have to focus on the ground. The English referees in the Premiership don't really want a contest at ruck. They just want the attacking team to play on. So as a result, there aren't many groundhogs in the game. It has to be a clear and obvious opportunity. And I think to the detriment of the national team, because when other referees come in and referee them, they give them the opportunity, but none of them have the mindset to go and do that. So they really need to change their focus to go after trying to slow ball down, try and pinch ball, and particularly knowing with how good and effective Ireland are at doing it, that they have to stop them there. They've got to win that shoulder. And Peter O'Mahony or Josh van der Fleer or a number of other players, even the props, Cian Healy's very good at it, Rory Best very good at it. Any of them get down, lock on a ball, it's game over, it's penalty time. So there'll be such a focus from England this week about winning that contest at ruck time. Get there early and do your job early, and then, the next phase will take care of itself.
Was it Scotland last year they got completely screwed over on it?
Yeah.
And the difficulty for it is if they're not used to it, they tend to give away penalties. They do it wrong. There's in last Six Nations there was a lot of neck rolls for trying to clear out people in a ruck because they hadn't put enough people into it, and it does happen for them. I don't know. I'm interested to see how they turn up. I think they're a much better team when Billy Vunipola plays. It gives them a sense of structure that they don't have when he's not there.
Yeah.
And he gets them over the gain line so comfortably that their game is easier for them. And their drop off in results happened exactly in time with him getting injured. And I wonder whether that brings them back. But his comments over the last couple of weeks were about his doubt for what he's doing, for how he's tackling people, for how he's hitting people, because his arms keep breaking, and it's there's that. It's kind of hard to look at him and think that he's racked by self-doubt, and I don't know whether he is or not, or maybe this was something he was in part of his recovery and he's over that now.
That's got to be the worst thing in your head as a number 8 as well, as you say, going into the breakdown.
You've had 2 in a row, yeah.
Yeah, you had 3 in a row. He broke both arms once, twice, but it's the last thing you can have in your head playing at all is an injury. So the second you're back, if you're cleared fit, you have to accept the fact that you are fit and you have to play that you are fit. You can't say, well, I might just gauge this, I might do this one a little bit differently. You just can't. You can't do that.
I think the battle of the back rows is so huge this weekend. I think on paper, if you can negate Billy Vunipola, I think you've got a huge chance of stopping England in general. He's such a focal point, and you see the stat numbers of, even with Saracens, their win ratio when he's in versus when he's out, and likewise England, are absolutely staggering. So when he goes well, I think because he's evolved brilliantly as a player, from his ability to be a playmaker as well as destructive ball carrier and offloader. He's a very, very difficult player to play when he's going well. You have to lock that ball up and stop him from sucking in defenders and then getting it out the back door. So if you are committing 2 defenders, you have to leave it to them to get the job done, and everyone else fan out and mark up the support runners. Wilson's been a big hit for them in November, but pretty I think there's uncertainty around him. Curry's got a couple of caps, a bit more of a groundhog, so it'll be interesting to see his battle with Van der Fleer. But I think that battle of the back row is so huge in the outcome of the game.
Yeah, the fact that Sam Underhill's not there for England, does that make a big difference in how you look at it?
A bit, because he's played well with Bath, and he's very good. He was very good in that New Zealand game, obviously. But I think Curry's a really nice player, and they liked him before he got injured early in the season, and it was kind of between him and Underhill. Underhill being number 1 now, but I think Curry is a nice player, and if you write him off and don't think that he's up to that standard, I think you'll get a rude awakening. So the fact that he is an all-out 7, I think, will suit England, because they need that against this Irish team.
It's interesting when you're listening to any of the English-based podcasts this week, or even reading the English papers, like, there is no great love, it seems, from anybody for Eddie Jones, and even the analysis of the team selection, like, it feels like the Liverpool team of 10 years ago, with the former players who'd won everything, constantly criticising. And again today, Austin Healy looking at Elliot Daly's selection at full back and questioning the struggles he had in the November internationals under the high ball. There always seems to be somebody ready to pick at them, somebody to have a little dig at this group. That selection in particular of Elliot Daly at full back, is that something that Ireland are going to be rubbing their hands at?
Austin didn't win everything, first of all. So just for clarity,
it's important.
That's more important than any comment on Elliot Daly. Because Elliot Daly has been pretty mixed in his performances, both with Wasps and with England over the course of the last 6 months. There's a few questions as to whether he should be there. Again, is he a World Cup winning fullback? Does he do all the basics extremely well? For all his detractors, Mike Brown's skill set, he delivers a certain solidity to the backfield. He's not a great link player, but very good tackler, very good kicker, very good in the air. And
what Andy Good?
Yeah, well, Andy Good's not going to be no good. No good. Yeah.
Sorry,
some people are obsessed with Andy Good.
my brain.
What's his name? Alex Good.
Alex Good.
Yeah,
Jeez.
he's Alex Good. For me, is obviously again a very, very exciting player. Been brilliant for Saracens, but internationally, he had a really bad game against Ireland about 4 years ago, and almost hasn't ever recovered since then. And if you wanted to be brave, you'd go with him because he'll create for you, and particularly with Farrell, he acts as a second foil, as a first receiver. When they get to midfield, rucks in particular, Farrell right, him left, and his footwork would pull apart any defence. So it's just a matter again whether he's good enough at the other parts. I think in the air there's still question marks around it, and international rugby there's such a focus on your kick contest that you have to have someone that can rule supreme in the air, and I don't know if he's the guy, but if you were very brave and you were thinking all attack, and Andy Good would be the man for you.
I don't know at this stage. All right, yeah. You mentioned some of the comments. You mentioned some of the comments that were coming out ahead of the game, and the comments from John Mitchell in particular about that Ireland, arguably the best team in the world, well coached side, resilient. They'll try and bore the shit out of us, basically.
Yeah.
Ireland take that as quite a compliment, because that is part of the Ireland game plan. Is they just wear you down physically, mentally. Keep going until eventually you just make a mistake. Like, that's part of the test for England, is that they don't get bored.
Yeah, I was going to say I think Ireland fans might react to that. I don't know whether Ireland react to that at all. I played with Mitch that's a long time ago, and he will try everything he can. He will throw anything into the mix he possibly can to try and get an edge. I don't know if were you there. You were there. No, you weren't.
No, it's just a year before.
98, we ended up with a load of things that were negative put on about us. And Gatland with the whole change rooms filled up with what everybody had said, negative, and then a load of positive messages that had come in as well. That's important at certain times. But if we're at that emotional battle, that's where we're thinking, I think we're in the wrong place, and I don't think this team is in that place.
But that point he makes of Ireland just boring the opposition, is there something in that? Is that something actually that is part of the Irish game plan, that they will test your stamina? They will ask the question that with 20 minutes left, if you still have that sort of fight?
We're a possession-based team, aren't we? An ability to take teams through phases like nobody else. We get to 25, 30 phases quite regularly. So, if that's seen as a negative, fine, but I don't think any of the players will see it as a negative. They'll see that as a string to their bow of having that ability to, keep their fitness up, keep their skill set up, keep their focus up, and then wait for their opportunity, be it a mismatch or trying to conjure something up when, because play ultimately goes flat every so often, and then you need a phase or two phases to build it up again to then have a strike play. You can't have a strike play ruck on ruck on ruck. You just don't simply have the numbers, and you have to bide your time and pick that moment to have a go at a weak defender. So a Kyle Sinclair in the midfield, and you get a Jacob Stockdale 1-on-1. That's what being clever and patient is all about. And if that's boring, well, that's okay.
But I also think Ireland play exactly what's in front of them. So if there's a really big, hard defensive setup, they will kick it. If they're not going to get over the gain line, if they can't keep onto the ball for a long period of time, or if they put themselves under risk with that, they tend to box kick, get themselves into a position of the field, and then see what happens then. If a team plays against them and flashes the ball wide, Ireland actually tend, if it's loose, Ireland tend to attack that. They do it all the time. So I don't know. I think it's pragmatic, maybe.
Before we get your predictions, there are other teams, it turns out, in the Six Nations starting tonight. Stade de France against Wales. Wales, a lot of people, Warren Gatland's last Six Nations in charge, but a lot of people's favourites, it seems. A lot of people are tipping them to have a big tournament. What's your expectation?
Well, they haven't won the competition for 6 years, which seems like a long time, because they often play very, very well. They played really well in the autumn. That's the best autumn that they've ever put down. They had huge difficulty in all that period of time. In their autumn matches, beating Southern Hemisphere teams, they just struggled with that all the time. I think they're confident, and I think their players love the fact of getting into camp, because they haven't been doing very well at European level, and they just can't wait that there's something new and different for them. It's a great game for them to play. I mean, I just don't want to say what France will do, but I actually like the French selection because it seems a little bit more like the Toulouse selection than it is about the traditional French club selection. It looks lighter and younger and inexperienced, and maybe this is the throw of the dice to see that France might come back to the ways of old. And so I think that's a cracking one. Have France got the full focus to turn up for this game, to go and put Wales to the sword? I think we'll see what sort of France are going to have it, because their Six Nations is over if they lose at home. I don't think they can kind of fight back from that.
I hope there's parity in the packs, because the challenge of backline against backline is mouth-watering. They're two very exciting backlines.
French pack, the heaviest pack in the history of the Six Nations?
Is it? Yeah.
That's one player down.
But the core group of that 9, 10, 12 axis is Clermont. Pinot's is exciting. Alain Pinot's son. Then you've Emile Ntamac's son. So it's a new breed coming through. It's a very, very exciting French backline. I hope they get the ball. But likewise, Wales, I agree with Keith, have had their best November, and as a result are quietly kind of slipping up on the inside of the, under the radar a little bit, come World Cup time, and picking off teams, and they'll fancy their chances of winning a slam or a championship if they can win against France.
And saying very little, which isn't like them.
Tomorrow then, Scotland against Italy. Italy in all sorts of trouble, unfortunately, for Conor O'Shea. Scotland, sort of dark horses for this, maybe not even dark horses, but what their club teams are doing in Europe this season, and showed signs last year they're trying to do something slightly different under Gregor Townsend. Do you feel they've come a long way over the last 12 months? Yeah, I think they have. I think that the two clubs in European quarterfinals will definitely be a shot in the arm to them going in, pep in their step going into national camp, and then I think they enjoy it under Gregor Townsend. He's very much a new age coach and sees it with an attacking mindset rather than trying to not concede. And I think that suits the personnel in there with the likes of Adam Hastings and Finn Russell. You have to remember as well that they have 3 home games in Murrayfield, and they are difficult to beat there. We had a slip up with a late bus 2 years ago. They will not roll over at home, so they'll beat someone else other than Italy in the Six Nations. I just hope it's not us.
Europe have had a huge influence on the Irish provinces and then onto the Irish team, because it gave the provinces the idea, actually, we're better than these guys. We may not be beating them on an international stage, but we can beat them on a club stage. And over a period of time, that builds it up. The Scottish teams have now got that taste, really, for the first time. 2 of them in the quarterfinals. Whether their confidence is built up on, like Gregor just throws the ball in the air for training and says, off you go, see what you can do with it. He's not he's structured, but not anywhere near as structured as we are in Ireland. It's whether that level of consistency can work for a full tournament. But I just think they seem to have lost some of that fear, and I think they could be dangerous.
Prediction-wise then, we'll start with tomorrow alone. How do you see it going?
I think we'll win. I think it could even be a second score. It could be an 8-pointer. I'm confident, excessively bullish perhaps, but no, I just think that, going back to Keith's point about the provinces, over the last 2 years in Europe, we've won 17, drawn 1 and lost 1 to English teams, and looking back to that performance in Twickenham and previous performances, I just don't feel that they've changed so much. I think our November was much better than theirs, results and performance-wise, so I definitely think that 7 or 8.
Look, they've Vinny Billipola back, they've Mauro Tuilagi back, and it's England, so we never want to get overly excited, but there's very little actually to suggest that Ireland shouldn't win this game.
No, and I think England have a good bench. I think Ashton is a proven try scorer, and if they're in with a sniff, I think he could still put a bit of fear in it. I think we're over 10 points. I think 11 or 12. That's where I am.
Wow. There's a lot of confidence in this room.
I was 25 points at the start of the week. No, I wasn't, no.
And does that extend to the championship as a whole?
Do you know what? I haven't even got my head around the championship. I don't think we'll see a Grand Slam this year. I think there's...
Well, if they win, they're not going to lose to France at home. Are they going to lose to Scotland away, or are they going to lose to Wales away? For me, Wales away is the big one.
And that's the one that's the one that would worry me as well. I do think the Scotland one, depending on what happens with Scotland, if there's a sudden rising of the arc from Scotland, that suddenly they now have this confidence that they've got from their clubs, they now have it fully, and they're winning matches. Yeah, I think that could be a very tough match.
Ireland for the championship by 2?
Yeah, I think there's a slam there. I do. I think there's a slam. But you've got to win the first one, don't you? No, but they will. They will. I think they'll win this weekend, and I feel as though there'll be a Grand Slam. One team will be playing for a Grand Slam in the final weekend, and I have a sense that it'll be Ireland.
All right, very good. Keith, thank you as always. Great to have you in the studio. Do you agree?
Brian O'Driscoll on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
It's spinning! It's spinning! Jonathan Sexton has made it!
Do you feel moderately happy?
No, I feel like I've been kissing my sister, I suppose.
In the pocket for his drop goal attempt. Here he goes, O'Gara. He's done it! That surely is the Grand Slam.
We target players all the time. That's part of rugby, isn't it? Let me know.
Sexton, wonderful pass, and Stockdale finishes!
There'll be more than grenades. There'll be full tanks and full shells landing on the Aviva.
Grand Slam winners on St. Patrick's Day at Twickenham.